busy out in the market, had the opportunity to make some time to join us for our second session of our 6 months Gearing Up POPI program. I think the first session was well received, and we did two sessions of the first training session because there was such an overwhelming response. And obviously now we've made it possible for STBB to host sessions that are much bigger, so we don't need to repeat the session unnecessarily. And as I said before, just for the incumbents that have just logged in, we will be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation to all of you that have attended today, and we are not sending the recording out to everybody, so the recording will only be available on request. We're reluctant to share the recordings, just widely in the market because, we don't want those recordings to be reshared and reshared without our knowledge. So do pop Michelle or myself an email if you would like a copy of the recording. Okay, so today I am going to deal with the next phase in the preparation to be POPI compliant, which obviously, as you know, is session 2. If you guys attended session 1, you will know that I dealt very basically with the definition of what information is in terms of the POPI Act. Firstly, what is information in terms of your and my businesses? Where we find our clients' personal information, what we do with the personal information, and then right at the end of the first session, I suggested that you go back to your businesses and that you then attend to a bit of a gap analysis. In other words, do a bit of an internal audit of, where you find your client's personal information, what to do with it. And I hope that all of you did have an opportunity to do that. If not, it's fine. We'll, as we go along in this session and the following sessions, I think it will become a little bit easier for you in any event to do that gap analysis in as far as what you're doing at the moment with regards to your client's personal information and what you need to be doing post July 2021 with your client's personal information. So a very quick recap regarding the applicability of POPI and when you have to be compliant in terms of everything we will be covering in the 6 sessions. You have to be compliant as a business by July 2021. So we've got about 10 months left in which we need to gear ourselves up, our businesses up, change our documents, develop a privacy policy, look at IT, look at devices, look at direct marketing, etc., etc. So that means that what I'm going to share with you today, which is the contractual changes that we think will be applicable or should be made, all of that's only really necessary by July 2021. In the next session, which will be session 3, I will be running through a template of a privacy policy which we've developed, so that gives you more confidence to start developing your own privacy policy. And that will include looking at IT security, general privacy, retention of documents and information, which forms part of your privacy policy, document management, in other words, where documents are kept and how it should be kept, and incident management, which all forms part of or will form part of your privacy policy. So that's just a reminder of the topic for our session 3. It also will be quite practical, so you look out for our registration details for session 3. So a quick recap of what we did in the last session, just for the guys who didn't attend the first session. We really want you and your business to do an information gap analysis, and the red circles here is what we covered in session 1. So we already went through in session 1 how client information is collected, where you get it from and where you store it, when you collect it and why you collect it. And we also identified some departments which are affected. So we still need to answer or look at the remaining gray circles in this gap analysis. And today I will specifically be looking at devising improvements in the documentation and in the processes. So that means devise improvements in each of the departments. A little summary of what we said we do with information in the real estate industry, but this applies to all other industries and other businesses as well. Once we've collected clients' information, whether we do so electronically or whether we do so physically in an information sheet, this is what we do. This is what we currently do. This is what all our businesses do. We upload the information into our system. We keep physical copies somewhere. We also upload onto external databases. We share the information. So we share the property information with our conveyancers. We share it with the banks or the mortgage originators. And then obviously we also share and store information on our devices, on our laptops, which are personal laptops often, cell phones. You know, we have our clients' telephone numbers in our cell phones. We receive emails on our cell phones. So just in preparation of today's presentation, please just keep in mind all of these things that you do with the information that you collect. You have to identify these things in your business. So the questions which I would like all of us to answer, and which hopefully I'll be able to answer for you today in the review of the changes necessary in your documentation, is: do we in our businesses ourselves know why we collect all the information from the clients that we collect? Why we input the data into our systems? Do we know ourselves why we're doing this? Or do we just do it because everyone else around us is doing it? Do we know why we are searching the details at all these different databases? Do we know why we share the information? Do we ourselves know why we share the information on the property databases like PropStats and Lightstone? So you need to be able to say yes to all the questions that you ask yourself regarding why. Why are you collecting the information and doing and processing the information? Do we know ourselves how we collect the client data? I mean, do we think honestly that the information sheet which is attached to the mandate is the only way that we are collecting client data? That is not entirely true. We've got to think widely. You know, if a client SMSs us the telephone number, or SMSs us anything, or WhatsApps us, or sends a screenshot of something, or an ID, a screenshot of an ID to our cell phones, that's also a way in which we're collecting our client data. So we must know how, in all respects, in our business, we collect our client's data. We must also know how we input the data into our systems. In other words, do we type it in? Do we scan it in? So you need to make a summary of that in your different departments. Do we know ourselves how we search the details for verification? I mean, do we just appoint some administrative person in our offices to do it, and we don't really know where all that information comes from? Do we know how we share the information with conveyancers? Obviously, we either email it. Some people use certain software, which is web-based, which is app-based. You know, currently I'm sharing my information with you in my PowerPoint, you know, through the Zoom app. Some of you have logged in through a web-based, you know, Zoom. So we need to know how we are sharing clients' information, not only with conveyancers and MOs, but generally. And do we know how we share the information with the property databases? A good example here, sorry, is collecting your seller's details and the property details on a mandate, maybe perhaps a new mandate that you've just signed. You share that information by typing in to Property 24. So you need to consider all the ways in which you collect, process, and share, and you need to make a summary of that in your gap analysis. And then more importantly, from our last session, do we actually ask our clients permission to collect their data, input their data into our system, search their details, share their information with the conveyancers and MOs, share the information with the property databases? I don't think so. And do we explain to our clients why we're collecting their data, why we're inputting their data, why we're looking up their details, why we're sharing the details, and also sharing the details with property databases, and why? Do we actually take the time to answer these questions for ourselves and then answer these questions on behalf of our clients. These 2 slides I've just gone through, just as a summary and a recap from the first session, in a nutshell, is what POPI expects. POPI, as a piece of legislation that forms part of a much bigger privacy drive internationally, from Europe through where the GDPR, and American states have their own privacy rules, and if South African companies interact with European and American companies, POPI and compliance with POPI makes it possible for you to continue trading with the European and American European countries and American states. But in a nutshell, these are the questions that you confidently need to answer by the time that we are finished developing your privacy policy and you're being compliant with the privacy laws, and amending all your standard documentation and relooking all the service agreements that you've got with your service suppliers. So these are very, very important recap slides that when you receive the PowerPoint, you need to go through this and utilize these questions in the gap analysis of your own business to identify and determine where you are falling short. So now that we've done the gap analysis and that we have determined that we fall short on most of the questions in the 2 previous slides, do we know why we're doing certain things regarding clients' information? Do we even understand what it means to go and share information with CMA and Lightstone? Do we understand that ourselves? If we don't, do we even explain to our clients? If not, we need to. How do we do it? So what is the next step? The next step is to just very gently start reviewing your standard documentation. So standard documentation does not only include your physical paperwork. You know, in the real estate industry, as in most industries, contracts are still signed physically. So if you are having your seller sign a mandate, most of the time you would meet with your seller and you would have the mandate signed on a physical piece of paper. And during the process of signing up the contract, you would get your seller to complete certain information and supply you with copies of certain documents. The supply of certain of the documents in the process of signing up a mandate is often done per email and maybe even WhatsApp. So it's not only your standard printed documentation that you need to review, it's also your processes of receiving WhatsApps. And do you need to implement or insert anything as a provider or as an indemnity into your WhatsApp messages? Do you need to do anything on your emails? So when I say review your standard documentation, I mean all your standard documentation, including all your electronic communication documentation. And now you need to insert an explanation as to why the particular information is being requested. We can't just ask the client for marital status any longer. We've got to now say that we need the marital status to be confirmed because of X, Y, and Z. There's got to be an enabling lawfulness. So you've got to give an explanation to the client as to why the particular information is being requested. You've got to reference enabling legislation when necessary. We'll look at that in a little while. There are lots of pieces of legislation that apply to your business and my business. And in terms of that legislation, we are obliged to do certain things. So we don't have a choice in the matter. Even if our client doesn't want to supply us with a marriage status, we are obliged to check the marital status in terms of the Deeds Registry Act, which means that we have got to reference the Deeds Registry Act as the enabling legislation in our explanation to the client as to why we are asking for marital status. We've also got to insert references to the client's rights regarding the processing and storage of the information. So on your emails, on your standard documentation, there's got to be some referencing in a little clause or a little line in which you tell your clients what their rights are regarding your processing of the information and how you store the information. You need to insert a space where the client specifically consents to the collection, processing, and storage of the information. You need to insert a space where the client specifically consents to the usage of the information for future purposes, and be specific as well as you sharing the information and with whom. And lastly, in all your standard documentation, you also need to insert a reference to your company's privacy policy that normally is available on your website. You and I, and most of us, do not yet do complete electronic business with our clients. Most businesses, like banking and insurance, the shopping, Woolworths, MTN, Vodacom are all app-based now, which means that all of these insertions appear on the actual electronic application that we subscribe to as, say, Woolworths' client. So it's much easier for a company like Woolworths to amend and review its standard terms and conditions regarding privacy because it's all done on its app. Whereas you and I do not have one central means of communication and receiving communication from clients. So we collect information on information sheets, on email, on WhatsApp. I can't reiterate enough that there's a wide variety of documentation and means of communication that you and I have to review and insert these things into. So because I am quite observant as an individual, I have been seeing in the last month many of the Android, because I have a Samsung telephone. Some of you might have an Apple telephone, but it would be the same on Apple as it is on Samsung. So if you are, whether you have an Android phone or whether you have an Apple phone, most of us have access to Microsoft products on our devices. So this is my telephone, and my emails with STBB is enabled on my cell phone because that is what is expected. You need to be available immediately. But I also have access to my Gmail emails, which obviously is linked to Google. So when I receive an email from someone with an Excel spreadsheet attached to that email, and I wish to open an Excel spreadsheet on my STBB email, which was sent to me and I receive it on my cell phone. These screenshots is what I've noticed come up when you use a web-based download of a Microsoft document onto your device. And I smile very broadly when I see this type of thing, because this type of disclaimer or notification is exactly what you and I need to start implementing, and which Microsoft, as a multinational company, which is the operating system for Android, has already put into their software in order to comply with South African POPI regulations. So I need you to know that this is taken very seriously by all companies, including Microsoft. So the first screenshot on the left, where it says "Getting Better Together," is a screenshot I took of the message that popped up when I tried to open my Excel spreadsheet on my cell phone. And if you read through this with me, you'll see what it means and how it relates to you and what you will need to start doing. So it says, we'd like you to share optional diagnostic and usage data about Word, Excel, all the Microsoft products. It's how we continue to improve. None of this data includes your name, file contents, or information about apps unrelated to Office. Then they ask me, because I've got to opt in or not, do you want optional data about your Office experience sent to Microsoft? So I can either choose accept and send optional data, or I can say don't send optional data. So now we're starting to see the opt-in and opt-out, even with your Android, Microsoft applications. This never used to pop up. An Excel spreadsheet would just open up. But now, because my Excel spreadsheet, which is on an STBB email, I'm trying to open that up through an Microsoft application on my cell phone, Microsoft is obliged to ask my permission if they may use the information which is embedded into an STBB email for certain reasons. The screenshot on the right is a very interesting note which pops up when you open up any of your emails and attachments to your emails like PDF or Excel. In addition to them asking your consent to share optional data, they actually make you aware of their privacy policy and where to find it. So Microsoft respects your privacy. I mean, you know, our documents and our electronic emails and WhatsApps and whatever else for STBB will have to have a pop-up that says STBB respects your privacy. So this just gives you a bit of guidance from the biggest corporations in the world as to what you need to start thinking about implementing or applying to your documents. So it reads, when you entrust your data to Office, you remain the owner of that data. It's quite profound, the wording they've chosen. We collect required diagnostic data to keep Office secure, up to date, and performing as expected on the devices it's installed on. This relates to the basic functioning of Office and doesn't include your name, file content, or information about apps unrelated to Office, like information on Twitter or Instagram or any other app that I've downloaded like Spree or Take-A-Lot. They're not allowed to use that information. Then it says we've updated the privacy settings for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Office Mobile, and OneNote to let you know what data we collect and how we use it. Let's take a look. So obviously I'm not going to click on this because it's only screenshots, but I did click on next and I read the whole Microsoft Office privacy policy before I accepted the opt-in to send my optional data. As a rule, generally, as an individual, as Mel, outside of STBB, I don't share my personal information on any of these apps. I share the very minimum because once you've shared it with Microsoft, it's difficult to ask them to remove it. And it just bothers me that all this stuff is floating around. But you would never, before POPI, have seen these pop-up screens for your Microsoft Office, apps that you're actually utilizing via your secured, work email, like an Excel spreadsheet on an STBB email that is emailed to me and I try and open it on my cell phone. So this is for Microsoft for Android, an example of a privacy policy prompt. So we want you to start thinking about privacy policy prompts in your standard documents or in your emails or your WhatsApps. The second example, I've got 3 examples, is me trying to read an article in a UK-based newspaper called The Mirror. So obviously I saw something that I wanted to open. So I clicked on the Mirror website, and I clicked on the hyperlink, and it took me to the Mirror website. And before I was able to read the article, this was the privacy notification that popped up. It was a prompt. So read this with me. We value your privacy. We and our partners use technologies such as cookies and process personal data such as IP addresses to personalize ads and content based on your interests. Can everybody just mute themselves, please? Sanet, can everyone mute themselves, please? Sorry about that, everybody. So let's read again. So this is me trying to open a Mirror news article electronically on their website. So this is a web-based privacy prompt that comes up. Because as soon as obviously I go into the Mirror's website to try and read an article, they grab some of the information which comes off my cell phone. So now they are obliged to tell me what they are grabbing. What information of mine are they taking automatically? And so that I know about it, because up till now, we haven't known about this type of thing. And they are obliged to now prompt us, which I'm really happy to see. So it says, we and our partners use technologies such as cookies and processed personal data such as IP addresses and cookie identifiers to personalize ads and content based on your interests. So interests, whatever apps, my shopping apps on, my Android, that will pop up. Measure the performance of ads and content and derive insights about the audiences who saw ads and content. So, I mean, all of that is very, interesting to read. Click below to consent to the use of this technology and the processing of your personal data for these purposes. You can change your mind and change your consent at any time, by returning to the site. So this is a screenshot of the prompt, the privacy prompt. So I went on to more options. I read their privacy policy and I opted out. So it's interesting that your web-based access by your clients, as well as your app-based access by your clients, should have these automatic prompts. Obviously, your and my business are not really app-based. We're still old-fashioned and we're on the phone, we send emails, and we have physical documents. But these are the types of sentences, the words and your prompts that will now need to appear on your physical documents, on your emails, and on your WhatsApps. Okay, the third example is very interesting because it relates, to an ad which I saw somewhere. I mean, something popped up. I can't remember if it was on Facebook or wherever, for a special winter accommodation at the V&A Waterfront Hotel, at the V&A Waterfront, for 2 people for 2 nights for 1,850 Rand. So that was the ad that popped up. And I thought, gosh, this sounds too good to be true. Let me click on it because that is a very good price. And when I clicked on the ad, it took me to newmarkhotels.com's website. And the first screenshot that popped up, the prompt, is the one on the left, where it says, get in touch, contact us, reservations, check availability, and then subscribe, okay? So you have to get past this first prompt page in order to book. So at the bottom, it says the website uses cookies to improve your experience. We'll assume you're okay with this, but you can opt out if you wish. Very, very short. So obviously, I didn't want to check availability, putting in my name and ID number and all of that stuff, my cell phone number, my email address, until I checked what this message at the bottom meant. So I read more. So I actually clicked on read more, which took me to a 25-page privacy policy for Newmark Hotels. So they've already updated their privacy policy, and they're in their privacy policy, they explain exactly what they do with your information, even if you just make an inquiry on check availability. And you can either accept them using that information after you've read their privacy policy. If you don't want to receive any emails or any pop-ups on your Facebook or any SMSs or WhatsApps from Newmark Hotels, obviously you need to opt out of that. But it prompts you very nicely through the 25 pages. And after you've read the 25 pages, which are all as short as the right screenshot, it's not long, but it's short and sweet, but it does get to the point on what they do with your personal information that you have put into the reservations availability check. So this is the type of thing that I've been noticing and that I have taken note of for preparation of these POPI sessions, because this is the type of thing that is being expected from you guys and from us, because as much as the Newmark Hotel Group, can everybody just mute themselves, please? Everybody is a bit panicky. You and I do not work on an app. We don't work only web-based. So there isn't just one place that our privacy policy and all the additional changes will be available. that is why we've got to do this full analysis, so that from the WhatsApps to the direct marketing, to your CMA connection, to your Property 24, all of it is looked at and complies with what we are seeing on these web-based applications. So I hope that the examples have now started your engines, because now I'm going to refine all these examples to our industry, and I'm going to also run through direct marketing. So stay with me. So this is just a very crude draft. What that means is, obviously it's just a draft on a A4 piece of paper that I just quickly put together. It gives you an idea of what we think the declaration or the privacy prompt should look like, or could look like, that you can insert into all your standard documentation, from your pre-printed mandate, your information sheet, your property conditions report, your service level agreement, your emails, anything and everything, your offers, your mandates, your leases, your lease mandates. This should appear, or something like this should appear, and read with me because you'll understand it. The following information is being requested from you for legitimate reasons explained hereinafter. The minimum amount of information is being requested from you. With your signature hereto, you confirm your agreement that the information you have supplied may be processed by the agency, and if you're not in the real estate industry and you've dialed in today, you will just use this for your business by the agency or the business, and shared with the professionals involved in the transaction, including but not limited to the conveyancing attorneys, mortgage originators, SARS counsel, and the deeds registry. This is not what I'm saying this should look like. Sorry, we're a frog in my throat. This type of indemnity or prompt, privacy prompt, is something that I think it could look like. So we can work on the wording that appears here. And then I said earlier, you must make your privacy policy available on all your standard documentation, which is emails, offers, mandates, information sheets. And if it's on email and or WhatsApp, it should be a hyperlink so someone can click on it like I did with Newmark Hotels, and it takes you to your privacy policy for your business, your agency, or other business. So to finish off that little declaration or prompt in your documents, you could say something like, our agency's privacy policy is available on our website, where you will also find the process of requesting deletion of your personal information or amendment thereof. So this makes a lot of sense. If you start thinking about inserting this or something similar, we can work on it, but something like this would be step number one, because you are obliged to explain why. You're obliged to explain how come, what, where, why. You're obliged to explain that. And then you're obliged to get the client's permission. So you must explain and get their permission. So this is the start of that process. Then, in your information sheets and or your offer, anything where, or any document that you request information from your client, you need to now qualify the reason why you're asking for that information. You'll now remember the example I gave to you earlier, which is the marital status. So you and I both know, for all types of information sheets, real estate related and otherwise, we always give our names, our ID numbers and or passport numbers and or dates of birth. We always give our marital status. We always have to give our cell phone number, our email address, our physical address, our business address. Those are the basic things that we supply. For property transactions, in addition to all of that, we ask you for your bond account number if you're a seller, your rates account number. If you're a buyer, we ask for all sorts of other things. Under each and every, can everybody just mute themselves, please? Everybody. So under each of the questions that you ask, wherever you ask it, you need to qualify the reason why you're asking it. So here's some examples. Most of what you and I in the real estate industry and in the legal industry ask for, we ask for because we are obliged to ask that in terms of the FICA legislation. We must identify our clients in all respects. We must identify the money and we must verify. That is our obligation in terms of FICA. So for most of the questions that we ask, FICA is the reason why we ask it. So under all the personal information sections in your information sheet that your seller completes, you will now insert this clause. In terms of the Financial Intelligence Center Act and amendments thereto, we are obliged to verify your identity as well as the source of the funds involved in the transaction. Boom. That in itself is an explanation to your client why you are requesting all the personal information from him and why you're asking for copies of a lot of things from your client. The second thing which I keep mentioning, or the second bit of information, is the bond account number from the seller. We always ask for bond account numbers. This is your explanation that you will have to insert under that little clause in your information sheet where you ask for bond account number. You type this in underneath in your standard document. In order to ensure that your bond is placed under cancellation timeously, we will be requesting certain information regarding your bond. Boom. That is enough explanation as to what and why. So this is what you'll keep doing whilst you're busy reviewing all your standard documentation. Everything you'll be reviewing against the standard. So in order to ensure that tax-related issues do not become a risk in the transaction, and because the conveyancing attorneys will be applying for a transfer duty receipt, we will be requesting your income tax number and tax status in South Africa. Boom. That is the explanation of why we ask for tax numbers. So you've got to put that, pre-print that into your information sheet now. And so it goes. I mean, many of the bits of information that we collect also has to do with our requirements, deeds office requirements. You know, our deeds office is a very strict government body, and there's a big piece of legislation called the Deeds Registry Act that requires us to check lots of things. We must get marriage certificates. We must certify marriage certificates. We must certify divorce orders, settlement agreements, lots of personal information that you and I ask from our clients. And this is the reason why we ask. So what I'm saying to you guys is, where you are asking for information, you need to justify why you're asking it. And if it's in terms of legislation, like FICA or Deeds Registry Act, can everybody just mute themselves, please? So you need to justify in all your correspondence where you're asking for info, why you're asking, and in terms of what legislation you're asking. So this is the type of example that I think you should start thinking about. You should start looking at when you get this PowerPoint presentation and you start identifying the different departments in your office, and then you start within that department or departments, you start identifying how information is obtained, why it's obtained. Then you need to start inserting these things in your standard emails, in your standard letters. You need to explain to people now why you're asking for information. The next big topic as part of amending or reviewing standard documentation and standard processes in terms of POPI is direct marketing. Because we have never really, in the real estate industry, made a massive point of asking existing clients or clients we're busy with, pertinently and specifically, their consent in writing to use their information for future marketing purposes. We've never really done that as a rule. So now we're all up in arms regarding the change where we are now obliged to get permission before we market to people, because we feel it's a catch-22 situation. How can we get the permission without contacting the client. So I'm going to now run through the direct marketing process that you will need to start thinking about, that you will have to implement from July onwards next year. So firstly, you've got to say to yourself, to whom do you market? So normally it's canvassing. I think that's normally the direct marketing in the real estate industry, is where as a real estate agent, you would be either phoning or emailing existing clients on your database with whom you've done a previous transaction, or you will be emailing or WhatsApping or phoning a new client that you have never dealt with before. And you have to deal differently with existing clients whose details are on your database, as opposed to new clients whose details are not on your database. And then you've also got to think about the way in which you want to market to either an existing client or a new client. Is it per email? Is it per telephone? Is it per SMS? Or is it by doing physical drops, door to door? So if the Act says, this is what it says in section 66, that a private or public body who has personal details of an individual may not use the information to send direct electronic marketing to that person by any means, SMS, WhatsApp, email, telephone, drops, unless the individual has given his or her consent that his personal information may be used in this way, or if the recipient is a customer of the business. The direct marketing must, however, still in each instance offer the recipient an opportunity to opt out of receiving further communication. So what do we do when we want to phone existing clients on our database who maybe did a rental 12 months ago, when we don't have their consent? So it's a catch-22. Can you see that? It's even more of a catch-22 when we buy contact lists from CMA and Lightstone and PropStats and the other property databases, which is standard. It's industry norm, because how else would you get contact particulars? You actually have a service level agreement with CMA. Pay them a fee to send you contact information, telephone numbers, email addresses. So it's even more dangerous to simply phone or email a new client where the new client's details have never been on your own database and you got that details from an outside database. So I wonder if any of you have considered how we in the industry is going to resolve this catch-22 situation where inevitably we can't stop canvassing. There's no way that we can stop cold calling, because that is how we pick up mandates. That is how we develop our reputation in a specific suburb, is where we do that cold calling. But if the law now tells us that we're not allowed to do cold calling unless we've got the particular person's consent, how do we resolve this? So what the law is telling us in terms of the Act is that we may only contact existing clients and new clients in any format whatsoever once we have received their signature to this consent form that is regulated. So this form appears at the back of POPI, and it says, a responsible party, which is you and I, who wishes to process personal information of a data subject for the purpose of direct marketing by electronic communication, must, in terms of this section, submit a request for written consent to that data subject in Form 4. So now, if your business plan involves making 25 phone calls a day or 50 phone calls a day, cold calling, because you've learned over the years that making 20 calls leads to 5 interest, leads to 1 mandate. I mean, you've got to keep it up. How are you going to get them to sign this consent before you phone them? How are we going to deal with this? Okay. So, if you are going to market your services to existing clients on your database from transactions concluded before. You know, 2 years ago, someone rented a property through your office and you were the rental agent, or someone bought a property and you've still got their details, or someone sold a property and you've still got their details. That type of client is a client who already exists on your database. It is our suggestion that you start sending this consent form out to your existing database across the board in order to ensure that you are receiving your existing database's permission to use their information for future marketing purposes or for any purpose, you know, for sending newsletters or phoning about a certain property, or maybe using information for statistics. So for existing clients, that's why I go back to the slide. If you want to ensure by July 2021 that your existing database has been cleaned up in as far as their information usage for future marketing, you need to start now figuring out how you are going to approach your existing database, maybe alphabetically or week by week or a certain number of people every month, but you have got to start sending out a consent form to your existing database in which you ask their specific permission to keep their details on your system and use it for whatever reason for future purposes. Okay, so that's relatively easy, I think, with your existing database. I mean, easy in as far as comparatively with new clients that doesn't exist on your database and clients whose details you got because you paid for it. You paid for a contact list from CMA or Lightstone. What do we do with that absolute type of cold calling where we've bought 100 numbers and names and email addresses from CMA and we now start phoning from A, B, C, D, E, cold calling, literal cold calling? What do we do with them? Okay, I'm going to give you a solution. I've thought about it. Think out of the box. So obviously, the best way to cold call a new client is to physically phone. If you choose to email, if you're also buying email addresses on the contact lists from CMA and Lightstone, then obviously on the email, you'll have as an attachment that consent. So on an email, it's relatively easy. You'll say to them, we want to contact you for this reason and that reason. Attached is the consent, please sign it. You'll discuss it with them. But if you are like me and we cold call, which is a phone call, I've even gone as far as to write a script for you guys or your canvases that you pay a commission to if they're successful in conversion. So you're going to make the phone call. You're going to dial the number of Mr. Nell, who's on the cold call list, the sheet that you bought from, the contact sheet that you bought from CMA. And Mr. Nell is going to answer and you're going to say, good morning, Mr. Nell. I'm phoning you from Jarvis Fourways and want to offer you a free valuation. Obviously, you can change, the narrative, but this is the idea. Are you interested? Worst case scenario is if Mr. Nell says, no, thank you, I'm not selling my property. Okay, tick. He said, no, I'm not interested in a valuation. You don't have to give up there. You can say, okay, thank you. We often send out area-specific property-related information and want to know whether you wish to receive any of our newsletters. Maybe he says yes, which is fantastic, because then you'll make a note, and once you've added into your database, you'll get him to sign that consent, the Form 4. Worst case scenario is he says, no, thank you. Okay, now number 2. You don't have to give up hope quite yet. The third question, in the hope that he will come around, is, okay, would you like us to remove your details from our contact database, or shall we keep it and make contact with you in, say, 6 months or a year? Maybe he says yes, which is a win, because if he says yes to any of these questions, you then have the opportunity to get him to sign the consent form. If he says no to all these questions, that's the end. You then need to remove Mr. Nell's details from your own database, and you need to be certain that your service level agreement that your company has with CMA, for instance, which is where you got Mr. Nell's telephone number from, has been reviewed. Because if Mr. Nell wants his contact details to be removed from your database after this conversation, that also means that he wants his details to be removed from CMA's database. He doesn't want to be contacted. And this is a very interesting concept that a lot of people have been struggling with. If you are removing the contact details from your own office database, but you operate as part of a much bigger group, you also need to implement a system where the details are deleted from the bigger group as well. So you're a branch office or you're a franchise office, you can't only delete Mr. Nell's details from your system if you are sharing his details on a central database. And if you received his details from CMA, CMA needs to remove his details as well. So this is how you will still continue to cold call, physical phone calls. You need to work on a script. So I just thought I'd give you an example of something I could think of. It doesn't have to look like this, but that is going to ensure that you are compliant with POPI, even when you are phoning the guy for the first time and you don't have a written consent. So if Mr. Nell has said yes to any of the questions, instead of when you meet with him or you email him, sending him this ridiculous form, which is the marketing consent form that our legislation people want your clients to sign, I've taken this form and redesigned it so it's more practical and it asks more questions, because you want more consent, you want more agreement. You don't only want the guy to say, yes, use my details for telephone calls. You want him to say, yes, use my details for telephone calls. I also want your newsletter. Yes, you can phone me if you have properties in this price range or in this area. You want like a wide consent. So it's very small and maybe you guys won't be able to see the content. But I've redesigned the form and I've come up with a new template consent form which complies with the law, but it's just a little bit wider. It says consent form firstly, and then it says form 4, application for the consent of a data subject for the processing of personal information for purposes of direct marketing. And then the client completes his name, then he ticks his consent that his personal information, which he completed on the information sheet of your agency in respect of whatever the reason was he completed it, may be processed. His personal information may be shared. His personal information may be stored. His personal information may be used by the agency for purposes of direct marketing of future property services and remain on the mailing list, news flashes, and I agree to receiving a marketing material telephonically, per email or WhatsApp. So that little block contains the consent that you need, either from your existing database or from your new clients that you've cold called physically on the phone and who've said yes to any of these questions. And you have to get this signed. You need to get it back from your client because you and I are not yet web-based. So if you want this form to be available web-based for clients to get access to easier, you can have a hyperlink to your website so that if they click on the hyperlink from the email, it takes them directly to this form where they can complete it and they can send it back to you. So it's difficult in my industry because we're not like the hotel industry where bookings are done online. You and I still physically meet with people and we still physically get things signed. And we physically make phone calls to try and get someone to give us a mandate. Whereas with hotel chains, like I showed you earlier, you don't phone to make a booking anymore at the hotels. You do it online. So it's easy for online or web-based businesses to get all this content onto their prompts, their pages. But you and I, unfortunately, in the archaic dark ages, and that's how it works until it changes, we have to physically get this form signed, either from our existing database, and I would suggest you get that form out to them as soon as possible so that you can start sifting through your existing database. Otherwise, if you start contacting people post July 2021 and you didn't get their details and you contact them from your database without having gotten their permission, there will be reputational damage when they complain, because there's an information regulator now. Didn't exist before. It was set up in terms of POPI. And people can complain to the information regulator, which will blacklist service suppliers. So at the same time as what we as suppliers of business services and items are obliged to start reviewing all our standard documentation, our emails, our hyperlinks, qualification of reasons why we're asking, what we're going to do with the direct marketing. Remember, guys, that we also consumers in South Africa. So you and I are entitled to all of this as well, which means that if MTN, DSTV, Sanlam, PPS, whoever else phones me 100 times a day trying to sell me a credit card, and I've asked them a million times to take my number off their system, if they continue to phone me, I can report them to the information regulator, and they could be fined. So, you know, we are entitled to these rights, but we are also obliged to ensure that our clients are entitled to these rights. So that is the answer to all your worries regarding direct marketing, and I hope that that helps you. When it comes to your service providers and reviewing the service level agreements, it's quite a wide exercise that you need to embark upon. You need to sit down and make a list of all the outside service providers with whom you either have a verbal contract or a written contract for them to supply services to you and your clients. I've given you some basic examples at the bottom of the slide that I could think of quickly. Property 24, you will have a contract in place with Property 24 because you are sharing your client's information with Property 24. So you need to ask for a review of your service level agreement with Property 24 in order that you align in terms of the privacy policies. So you must now start establishing what Property 24 does with your client's information, because you have to tell your client that you're sharing his information with Property 24 and get your client's permission. So if the client in 6 months' time tells you to remove his information from your database, you would not know whether Property 24 should remove or not. It needs to be in your service level contract so that you can force Property 24 contractually to remove the information. It's of big concern to us on the legal side of things that there's been many complaints over the years regarding information sharing with these property portals and the information not being deleted. This is a problem for Property 24 and private property, which they are going to have to deal with specifically, like Microsoft has done and like all the other big service suppliers have done. They're not allowed to keep the client's information that you have passed on to them unless they've asked the client's permission. And they might well do so via you. So if you are intent on lodging your mandate with Property 24, you will probably start seeing that Property 24's back office, the requirements of you as the agent, where you have to put the information inside, pops up on Property 24, that there will now be extra and additional tick boxes that you will have to complete on your seller's behalf. Now, do we need to delete the information once the sale has been concluded, etc., etc.? So you'll also start seeing the bigger property portals, you know, qualify and explain what they do with the information. And liability is going to be a big issue if you, in your business, do not check all the service suppliers' service level agreements with you and check that the privacy policies are in line with yours. You know, you need to know what your mortgage origination channels, what their privacy policies are. You need to know what STBB's privacy policies are. If we are going to share a client, which we do, from Property 24 to CMA to STBB to your estate agency to the mortgage origination, then 5 service suppliers, which are all accountable to the particular party in terms of the information privacy. So we all have to have the same alignment in terms of, you know, our policies. So we can't have one of the 5 service suppliers keep the information, forever and use it, where the other 4 clearly have a policy in place regarding that. So if your service provider should align with your policy. For example, if I'm not sure what I said there. If your client if you purchase client contact details from, for instance, CMA, your service level agreement with CNA should make provision for the simultaneous deletion of client information if a client has requested deletion of the information. It must be deleted everywhere, not just in your office. If a prospective client requests you to delete their details, you need to ensure it's deleted also from the source. Because if you are paying a fee, you will be held liable if CMA doesn't delete it on request of the client. An analysis of all service providers need to be done, and amendments to existing service level agreements must be signed in order to ensure that shared clients' information is dealt with in line with the organization's privacy policy. I'm actually going to, before our session 3, I'm going to do a little bit of an FBI investigation into the property portals and what their current privacy policies say. So I'll print them out if I'm able to find them web-based online, because they should already be available online. And then I'll share that with you guys next time when we start session 3. The last thing I want to say to all of the attendees here today is I want to just quickly share with you what STBB is busy doing, because you can imagine the size of our organization and the amount of information that we have collected over the last 120 years, and that we are still collecting on a daily basis, and that we are sharing it with our agents. We're sharing it amongst the branches. We're collecting, we're processing, we're sharing, and we're using it for marketing. So what are we doing about the situation? And on top of all of that, the security, the actual privacy, security of our clients' information, which is always at risk from fraudsters. So we are trying to do away with sharing or requesting that our clients share their personal information with us over email. We have developed an application called STBB Direct that very soon is going to be the only way that we communicate with sellers and buyers. We're not going to do emails anymore from our laptops. The emails are going to come from the application, so it is going to be secured. And in return, we are going to ask our sellers and our buyers to upload copies of their personal information onto their cell phones and save it onto our app. So we are going to move away from email-based business, which is where the danger lies, not only from a privacy perspective, never mind all of that, but from a fraud and an interception perspective. And we are ourselves moving into an app-based communication sphere. Something we need to start thinking about, because there is no way that app-based communication can be intercepted, which is why most of your big organizations have moved to the app-based communication. Standard Bank, you do your banking through the app. Discovery, we do all our business through the apps. We order all our stuff online. We don't go onto a website, we download an app. So payment is done through the app, and it's a secure payment. You don't have to email someone bank details, print the bank details, go to the bank or do an EFT, generate proof of payment, and then email the proof of payment, which is where the interception takes place. So if you guys are not going to move into the app-based sphere, which is difficult because we all need physical copies of documents still to lodge and to certify, so it is difficult. And if you're going to continue doing business the way you're doing business now, which is physical emails, you do need to start implementing these changes with all the opt-outs and, the privacy policy, hyperlinks, payment policies need to be sent to clients, and you need to password protect documents. So there's a lot that you can do, but just so to show you how even a company like ourselves are moving into the we're moving away from email-based business, and we're moving more and more towards electronic app-based business because it's a lot more secure. So that is what we are doing. If you haven't downloaded our app yet, it's free of charge. It's STBB Direct app. You can go onto Google Store or Play Store, download it and have a look. You can do calculations on it, all sorts of things. And then when our upgrade soon becomes live, you'll start seeing the changes to the app where we will start communicating with sellers and buyers via the app instead of email. So it's worth your while just having a look at that. It takes a hell of a lot of money to develop it, but we do think it's the way of the future, especially with what the requirements are in terms of privacy and also to protect clients' information. I mean, you and I are held liable if people's deposits are stolen because we are sending proof of banking through email and we're not even password protecting that email. So yeah, so next time I'll show you what the privacy policy looks like for property 24, and yeah, that will be that, and that's the end of session number 2. Let me look if there are some questions that I can answer. Oh, there's a lot of chat here. Oh gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna get to. Okay, let me see if there's some questions from that top. I hope all of you enjoyed the presentation, that it gave you just a little bit more insight into some of the practicalities that you will start seeing on, or need to start seeing on your own documentation and emails. Okay, a few people have asked for the presentation to be emailed. Mr. Null says yes, but then not sign the consent. Would an email be fine confirming the conversation? Petra, very good question. It isn't sufficient because the Act says if you contact and direct market, you need that form signed as regulated. So you need to get that form to him in an email. Unfortunately, just him WhatsApping you to say, yeah, it's fine, is not enough. Or an email saying, yeah, it's fine, no problem, it's not enough. Unfortunately, POPI prescribes that consent form 4 that I've shared with you today, that you will see again in the PowerPoint, is the document they want your clients to sign for purposes of direct marketing. Someone asked, what if Mr. Null says, where did you get my details in the first place? You've got to answer him. You don't have to volunteer that information, but if he does ask you, you've got to say to him, we received your information from Lightstone, which is a property databases that information are loaded onto for statistical purposes. I mean, contact particulars aren't that confidential. Telephone numbers perhaps, but you know, that you can find a lot of details at the deeds office, which is completely public. But yes, if Mr. Null asks you where you got his number from, you've got to say to him, you got his number from property databases where his details have been stored because for statistical reasons. You've got to declare that. Okay, Lynette, okay, with people rushing off. If you've got more questions, you know, obviously all of these new practical ways and suggestions that we are making, it does challenge one a bit. You know, you have to get your head around it a little bit and look at it maybe 2 or 3 times. So take your time in looking through the presentation. Have a look at it. You know, also maybe Google a bit. You know, I saw this morning, I was going to share it on the slideshow, but I thought, no. There are companies which offer packages. If you don't want to do your own, or you don't know where to start, you know, despite what we are giving you now, and next time we're going to show you a policy document, there are companies who charge you a massive fee to do all of your things for you. So you can Google companies. There's about 6 companies that I see now recently started offering. So, yeah, so, you know, you can have a look there as well. So Inga asked, this will in other words mean the following. If half the amount of people in a specific neighborhood are opting out or not willing to sign consent form, our available information on CMA Lightstone will be completely restricted, which will influence the way we value properties going forward. Now, Information on CMA and Lightstone can stay on CMA and Lightstone for purposes of drawing statistics. So you only need a client's consent if you are intending on marketing to him. But if you're using the information to draw valuations, it's completely acceptable to use the information without the client's consent. So you're not actually using client's information to directly market to him. So all people in the neighborhood, all the information on CMA can be used for valuations, but not all of them can be directly marketed to. You first got to make those phone calls. So you've got to draw a distinction between valuations, you can use all information without permission, and phoning to canvas. So it's only phoning to canvas which is limited. Using for statistical reason and valuation and price counseling, not limited. It's unlimited. You can use any information. So previous sales, date, sales price, that's not personal information. I think if you haven't got the first session's presentation in which I screenshotted the definition of personal information, I can resend it. So previous sales, date, sales prices, that's not personal information. So you can share that information. You're not allowed to share information regarding the guy's name and the guy's ID number, and you're also not allowed to phone him unless you've got that consent or you've got at least a telephonic consent. Okay, let's see, any other questions? No, I think everybody else is just saying thank you. And yes, I hope to see all of you again in the new, or in the third session. It was lovely for us to have connected. We appreciate you taking the time to attend the session today, and we are more than happy to send you the first presentation in PowerPoint with the second presentation in PowerPoint and address your questions to us. We will be happy to assist. And then we'll see you guys at the third session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.